Okay, so if back in the before times and coming up in the future times, since things are starting to get back to normal after COVID, you're going to go somewhere and you have to wait for a while, sitting in close proximity to other people, an airplane or doctor's office or the Secretary of State. And everyone just stares at their books and their magazines and their phones. Sometimes you give or get a polite greeting, and then you go back to your book or your phone or your magazine. Sometimes you get stuck sitting next to a singularly unpleasant person whose presence you hope to never encounter again in this life or the next. Other times, though, you get to sit next to somebody and you just click and you talk the whole time, whether you ever see each other again or not. The movie Fight Club called this type of person a single-serving friend. Well, the greatest single-serving friend I ever made was in a mechanic's waiting room. The only empty seat was next to a nun in full habit, dressed all in gray. So I went to sit down. She smiled at me. I smiled at her. I went to pull my book out of my bag, and she started talking. We talked for some 2 hours, non-stop. This sister would have never survived in the sort of order which requires a vow of silence, let me tell you. But in the course of our conversation, she mentioned a friend who had recently died of a very painful cancer. And after a brief pause, with great determination, she said, "When I get to heaven, the first thing I'm going to do is punch God in the face for letting that happen." And I laughed and said, "You'll probably have to wait in line." And then we both laughed, and then we didn't laugh, and it was suddenly uncomfortable. So we moved on to other topics. Maybe the Midas waiting room isn't the best place for trying to unravel God's motivations or for solving the eternal question of why bad things happen to people who don't deserve them. If there is a line of people waiting patiently to punch God in the face, I can picture Job getting in that line multiple times, like a kid on the playground waiting to ride the slide over and over again. That one's for my kids. That's for my crops. That's for my reputation. At this point in Job's story, the man has reached his breaking point. God has allowed Satan to torment Job in some cockamamie bet to find out if Satan can get Job, a righteous, blameless man who lives a comfortable life, to curse God. Job loses his wealth, his servants, his children, his health, but never does he curse God. And then his so-called friends show up. They start off trying to be a little sympathetic, but eventually they devolve into blaming Job for all this horrible misfortune. "Well, you must have sinned just a little. Go make penance and God will set everything right." This is when Job explodes. It is too much. He is blameless and he knows it. He shouts and cries into the heavens, accusing God of injustice and unfairness and letting the wicked prosper at the expense of the righteous. He still never curses God. He's just letting loose with the frustration of his long torture. God, being a master of drama, shows up in a whirlwind, and that's where our reading starts. I would like to say to God from the bottom of my heart and the depths of my soul, that answer is garbage. I hate every single word of it. "Who are you to question me?" God asks. "You will never understand my reasons." This is the least satisfying answer possible. Through thousands of years of people crying to heaven, lamenting loss and pain, it's the only answer anyone has ever gotten. And it's actually an improvement over the majority theology of the day. Job was written specifically as a response to the very common belief that if bad things happen to you, you must have deserved them. Of course, we still have that belief with us today, floating around. We hear it every time something bad happens. She got raped. She shouldn't have gotten drunk. Oh, a massive hurricane hit Louisiana. It's because of their decadent lifestyle. Terrorists flew planes into buildings. God is punishing America for its sin. Every single time, this answer, this victim blaming, is absolute trash. It is wrong. It makes God look like a petty tyrant. And it provides some illusion of control for terrified people trying and failing to believe that if they do everything correctly, the bad things won't happen to them. They marked their house correctly with the blood of the Lamb. The angel of death will pass over them. And of course, it isn't true. At the other end of the spectrum, the idea that things happen because of nature's action and human action and pure random chance, that seems better to me. That's easier to deal with. Things just happen. Sometimes they're awful. Sometimes they are people's own fault, but if they are, it's something we can observe. There's a cause and an effect we can point to, and it just makes so much more sense. But it doesn't leave any room for God. We're standing in this in-between place, in this tension of believing that God does not punish sin the way Job's friends wanted to believe, but also believing God is in control. So all the tragedy and horror of life are caused by God, or at least are approved by God. Where does that leave us? Right back at the whirlwind. You don't get to know. You can't understand. I have purposes beyond yours. So unsatisfying. Brings us right back to wondering if God even has a face so we could punch it. It is a terrible thing to have to tell someone who comes to you asking, why? Why did they die? Why did the hurricane come? Why did COVID happen? And you have to tell them, I don't know. The God who stills the storm is also the God who made the storm. So what are we supposed to do with that? The only way I can think of to redeem this terribly unsatisfying answer to grief and pain is kindness, compassion. I don't know why the storm came, but would you like to talk about it? I don't know why she died, but would you like me to sit with you? Do you need to cry? Would you like a distraction? Can I offer you some cookies or a hug? I don't know why we hurt so much, but may I walk with you and help you walk when you feel like you can't go any further? I do not want at all to suggest that God allows or causes pain in order to teach us compassion. That is too cruel of a lesson. But pain does exist, and grief does exist. So is it not so much better to comfort than to blame? I don't know why the terrible things happen to you, but I love you and I grieve with you. I won't guarantee that in heaven I won't find my nun friend and get in that long line with her to wait our turn to punch God in the face, but our fists are very small, probably won't do much damage. Meanwhile, keep learning how to sit with this very uncomfortable mystery with a very unsatisfying answer. As long as we also can keep learning to meet that mystery with compassion instead of blame. Amen.